Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's Top 10 Series Finales. For this countdown, I rate my favorite final episodes of my favorite TV series. So major spoiler warning, as I will be talking about the ending of each TV series. My suggestion is, if you come across a TV series which you haven't seen and don't want the ending spoiled for you, put the video on mute until I get to the next episode. As the visuals don't really spoil anything, mainly what I say about it will spoil it. So when you see the next number come up, you'll know it's okay to turn the volume back up. As I do with all my top 10 videos, I'll start by giving my bottom 5 least favorites. So in this case, it will be the 5 worst season finales of my favorite TV series. Number 5 is The Last Word, The L Word. The L Word is one of those shows that had a phenomenal first season but went downhill from there. By the time we get to the last episode, they have long since jumped the shark and gotten into I don't care what happens to any of these characters territory. But even barring that, this finale still manages to be bad on top of all that. They had long since destroyed Jenny's character and turned her into an egotistical moron to the point where even the actor said that she was unhappy with what they did to her character. And in a Who Shot Mr. Burns type fashion, in this episode, Jenny pissed off each of the characters to the point where everybody wanted to kill her, and eventually someone did. Who? I have no idea, because this episode never answers this. Instead, they all get into cars and do a dance number for the final scene. Seriously, what the fuck is this shit? Someone out there might know the answer as to who killed her, but don't bother telling me, because this episode and final season was so bad, I really don't care. Number 4 is Remember the Monsters, Dexter. The thing that really frustrates me about Dexter is this episode could have been good had they played things a little differently, because there were elements of the final season that were good and had the potential to have a really exciting final episode, but it did not at all live out to that potential and instead fizzled out as Dexter's big confrontation with the main serial killer was a mega disappointing. Instead, they focused on the death of his sister, which was executed so poorly. It was so melodramatic with the storm coming and big sad music playing. I just wasn't buying it. I didn't get emotional at all. And if killing off a beloved character isn't going to be great storytelling, then don't bother doing it at all. But the least they could have done was to have Dexter kill himself in the storm as well. If they're going to set up the situation where his girlfriend and his son are being abandoned, he might as well have killed himself rather than this cop-out of him changing his identity and assuming a new life. That doesn't resolve anything. He's still a serial killer. This show has spent 8 seasons reassuring us that that was his nature, and now would you expect us to buy that he just fades into obscurity? I'm not buying this half-ass ending at all. Number 3 is the finale, Seinfeld. In my opinion, Seinfeld was by far the best sitcom to ever air on television. So it was an extra mega disappointment when such a funny series went out in such an unfunny way. And I do think that was the worst aspect of this episode. It wasn't at all funny. Add to that, they felt it would be good to highlight how big of dicks the main 4 characters are, but to me that wasn't what the show was about, and to spend the final episode in highlighting how much they affected other people's lives and sending them to jail for it shouldn't have been the show's legacy. And why do so many TV series think it's a good idea to have final episodes be a flashback show? It's not a good idea. Flashback episodes generally suck and are done to save money. Ending the series on one is not a good idea. Alright, number 2 is Day 8, 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. 24. In typical 24 fashion, they decided to end the entire series by recycling a plot points that they've already done. Why not? makes sense at this point in this series. The entire show is just recycled plot points repeated over and over again. In this case, they repeated the season 4 finale ending where Jack does something to make him a wanted man, forcing him to leave the country and live in exile and assume a new identity. Like I said with Dexter, I think 24 had the potential to have a good ending. The season actually started to get good when Jack Bauer put on all that armor and totally kicked President Logan's ass. But instead of doing something original, they just repeated exactly what they had done in season 4. Before I came into this episode, I thought to myself, there's only one of two ways this show should end. Either Jack Bauer goes off with his family, leaves the anti-terrorism business for good and lives happily ever after, or he dies. That's it. Those are the only two endings I would accept. But instead they do this stupid exile cop-out shit, which they've already done. I understand now that they rebooted 24 into another series, why they left it open-ended, but I think they should just give this show a rest once and for all. And the number one worst finale from my favorite TV shows is Endgame Star Trek Voyager. Those who've seen my other Voyager videos probably saw this coming, and I could talk for hours about how much this episode sucked. But to sum it up, I felt it did an extremely poor job of satisfying fans of the show and staying true to its origins. It is an attempt to overstate that the journey is more important than the destination. They managed to suck all the fun out of Voyager finally reaching its long-term goal and reaching Earth. And in the biggest FU the show runners could possibly give the fans, they ended the show as soon as Voyager reached Earth and instead gave us some alternate timeline bullcrap future at the start of the episode, which was supposed to show what the crew would be like once they reached Earth. It had a plot that was so full of holes it was worse than Swiss cheese. It made the Borg too powerful to make sense for the entire Star Trek universe. It violated every rule the show had set up itself about the characters not wanting to erase their time in the Delta Quadrant, and it had ridiculous, implausible romance. And since when in the hell is Reginald Barclay a main character on Voyager? Alright, before I get to my top 10, I just want to mention an honorable mention, that is Prison Break. I was a bit confused at which episode is considered the series finale for this, because the last episode to air in Season 4 is Killing Your Number, was a very good wrap-up to the series that I considered putting in my top 10. However, there was a TV movie that came out after the episode which served as an epilogue, which the movie was called The Final Break, but it was also referred to as The Old Ball and Chain and Free. And the article that I read stated that this TV movie was actually considered the series finale. And this particular movie sucked very badly. I would definitely put it in my bottom 5, and in order for me to have a strong opinion on Prison Break, I tend to pretend that this episode doesn't exist. So since I'm not sure which could be classified as the series finale, I decided to leave Prison Break out altogether. Okay, so now on to my top 10 best TV series finales of my favorite TV series. Number 10 is Gauntlet Stargate Universe. It's quite impressive considering it was announced that the show was being canceled after this episode had already been written and shortly before it was shot. That they managed to do some last-minute rewrites to this episode to make it a fitting ending to the series, while at the same time leaving it open-ended enough that should the series be revived, the story could be continued. Unfortunately, it looks now that it will never happen, and we will never get the end of the story of the serialized show. However, this episode did a great job at giving a sense of closure to the characters involved in the story. Although they remained trapped on the ship, they seemed to make peace with themselves and celebrated their adventures together. And it had enough of a suspenseful plot to keep this episode an interesting one and a good in its own right. Number 9 is Accident Omnis, Oz. Oz was unfortunately another show that went downhill in its final seasons, but fortunately it managed to pull together for its final episode and produce something that was both thrilling and satisfying as an end to the series. As we finally see the big conflict between Beecher and Schillinger that had lasted all series come to an end when Schillinger attempts to kill Beecher but is betrayed by Keller, who sets him up to be killed unwittingly by Beecher instead during a performance of Hamlet. I found this to be a very satisfying end to the story, which was topped off when Keller, once he's rejected by Beecher, he kills himself, but not before sending anthrax to the mailroom of the prison, killing all of Schillinger's entire gang and closing down Oz once and for all. Number 8 is The End, Lost. Now, I have a lot of problems with this episode, as I stated in the other videos, but my main beef is with the final season and the Flash Sideways storyline. I actually thought this episode was executed quite well, earning it a spot on my top 10 best. However, the fact that it was the centerpiece of the Flash Sideways storyline, where it revealed what is to me its most ridiculous premise, which I very much felt was a cheat and overall poor writing, is why this episode, for my second favorite TV series of the past 20 years, only ranks at number 8 and not much higher. But there was a lot about this episode to admire. I was perfectly happy with the answers it did give, and the final showdown between Jack and the Man in Black for the survival of the island, which basically translates into the survival of the entire human race and the protection of the light of the world. I loved, and I loved the online storyline and the resolution of Hurley becoming the new man in charge with Ben as his right-hand man, and the symmetry of the ending, which mirrors the opening scene where Jack opens his eyes and Vincent the dog runs away from him after the plane crash, whereas here Vincent the dog runs to him as he lays down and the plane takes off as he closes his eyes to die. I find that absolutely beautiful, and it would have been perfect had it not been ruined by being intercut with the horrible Flash Sideways scenes. Number 7 is Daybreak, Battlestar Galactica. This was a very good ending and very satisfying in some respects that give the show its final resolution. We get the final showdown with Battlestar Galactica and the Cylons, which I found immensely satisfying. The one scene in this episode I found absolutely amazing was the scene where Starbuck put in the coordinates using the musical notes, which actually ended up leading to what we now know as Earth in the distant past, making this the Galactica crew the origins of the human race. That scene gets me every time. Even though I found some of the things a bit hokey, such as Starbuck disappearing into thin air and the ending in modern day times, overall I found this to be a very satisfying, fitting ending to a good series. Number 6 is The Truth, The X-Files. Many fans of the show criticize this as horrible, but I quite liked it. It may be frowned upon because it features the unpopular characters of Agent Doggett and Agent Reyes, who were originally introduced to replace Mulder and Scully, and because it was centered around the not-so-popular storyline of the super soldiers. But I actually found this to be a fitting ending. After all, they did bring Mulder back for this episode and made him the center focus. Plus, I quite liked the storyline of the super soldiers, and I found this episode very exciting. Plus, we get the death of the cigarette-smoking man that was pulled off in an epic fashion. I felt it was a fitting ending to a good series. Number 5 is Goodbye to Bloo, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. Now, you may think it's a bit silly to include a cartoon geared towards children on this list, but hear me out. I have never seen a more clever way to end a comedy series than this. In this episode, the main imaginary friend character, Bloo, thinks that his best friend Mac is moving away for good, so he tries to come up with one last adventure they can go on. So Bloo suggests many things that they can do, and everything he suggests is something they already did in a previous episode. So eventually he comes up with the idea to jump the shark. So he literally like gets in the pool and gets his water ski equipment out to jump over a shark. I don't think he ends up doing it in the end, but the point is that I found this really funny and clever way for the writers to say they need to end the series now. Otherwise, they'll simply jump the shark because they believe they took the series as far as they could take it. And this episode was very funny on its own right, and one of their better episodes, so I say well done, and it deserves recognition. Number 4 is Everybody Dies, House MD. House was yet another example of a show that faltered in its final season. However, they managed to pull it together in the last set of episodes, putting together a very interesting and well-executed plot about House's best friend Wilson being diagnosed with terminal cancer, which culminated in this exciting episode. I felt was a great send-off to the series. The biggest disappointment of this episode was that Cuddy wasn't in it. However, I'm sure that had to do with the actor refusing to do it for whatever reason. So they got House's ex-wife to be in it instead, who is really a minor character that only appeared in the second season, but I suppose it makes sense for the character of House. But this was an amazing send-off to House, making this episode about him contemplating whether or not to commit suicide, which 100% goes with the character of House and that the journey he's been on throughout the series. But also in House fashion, instead of committing suicide, he fakes his death in order to run off with Wilson and spend Wilson's last moments together. I gotta say, I was totally fooled that House was dead because I knew that this was the last episode, so I could totally see them killing off House. But I didn't feel cheated at all when it was revealed he was still alive, because that was such a House thing to do, to fake his own death. But you got all the proper send-off with all the other characters who's been on the show throughout the years saying goodbye to him at the funeral. You even got to see all the dead characters who were on the show via his hallucinations. To me, it's the perfect end to a great series. Number 3 is What You Leave Behind, Star Trek Deep Space Nine. This was an excellent send-off to what is, in my opinion, the best Star Trek series, as it finished off the Dominion War story arc in a typical dark fashion that was true to DS9's nature. The Cardassians, who had committed Nazi-level atrocities, finally got the end they deserved, but it was felt bittersweet and disturbing, bringing in a level of complexity and reality that only DS9 can do. Plus, it wrapped up all the individual character storylines in a bittersweet DS9 fashion as well, particularly with Odo, who left his lover Kira to rejoin his people, and Sisko, who left his new wife and unborn child to live a life of godhood with supreme beings. And of course, you finally got the big showdown between Dukat and Sisko, although it was a bit abrupt and ended too quickly. Plus, this episode had Lord of the Ring level multiple ending that seemed to drag, such as the slightly hokey memory sequence done to the singing hologram montage. But despite that, I felt this episode was extraordinary, ending to an extraordinary series and staying true to the episodes that came before it while wrapping up and paying tribute to them. Number 2 is All Good Things, Star Trek The Next Generation. More than stayed true to the material that came before it, it actually relived it, as Captain Picard inexplicably time traveled between the past, present, and future. We got to see him relive the events of the pilot episode with characters like Tasha Yar, who died, and Miles O'Brien, who moved on, and also got to see a possible future and where all the different characters end up. If you've seen my Next Generation Top 10, you know this is my favorite Next Generation episode, as it embodies everything about the show that makes it great. Intriguing science fiction situations, suspenseful actions, great character interactions, and we see the Enterprise crew come together as a family to overcome the ultimate dilemma that could erase all life in the galaxy. And we get some intensely awesome scenes with Q as he tries to cryptically guide Picard, including recreating the trial in the pilot episode and taking him back billions of years to the origins of human life on Earth. The speech Q gives Picard at the end of this episode, I think, beautifully sums up everything Star Trek The Next Generation is about. You couldn't ask for a better send-off to this series. And my number 1 favorite series finale is Felina, Breaking Bad. I said it before, I feel Breaking Bad has the best final season of any TV series, and I extend this to the finale as well. Although I think the best episode of the show was 2 episodes before this one, I still found this to be the perfect end to an outstanding series. Although there are no huge surprises in this episode, it ends perfectly the way it should, namely with Walter White dying. But what he does before he goes is what makes this episode so great. What sticks out to me the most in my mind is when he finally admits to Skylar, after years of repeating over and over again that he did it for the family, he finally admits to her that he did it for himself. He did it because he liked it. But more than that, true to the brilliance of the character, he manages to trick Gretchen and Elliot into giving the money to his family, which was his ultimate goal, and he manages to get revenge on the neo-Nazis that stole his money by killing them with a remote-activated machine gun. Man, that was so sweet. And at the same time, he freed Jesse, which despite all they've been to, I think he still cared about him enough to save his life. All these things I feel makes the most satisfying ending a TV series could want and the best series finale. So that's it for my top 10 series finales. You should check out some of my other TV series videos. I have a lot on various Star Trek series and Game of Thrones. And keep an eye out for more to come. And thanks a lot for watching.